Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Zinx is absolutely complicated and amazing in the math department. Her ultimate, Dirty Healing, is a large part of her kit. As a sustained tanky hero, this is arguably the most important part of Zinx. And understanding how it works in the math department, how to build for it, what stats do you do, and when, is really important. Oh my goodness! Hopefully this makes some ounce of sense. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a Paragon guide. I am Sylphin. Zinx is looking so awesome. So guys, let's get right into it. Zinx is pretty awesome. This will be for another video, as this is what I will use for that. Just know that her other abilities actually have pretty good scaling. The bad medicine, yeah, it's only 0.4, but it just does deal a lot of damage under Kitty Claws. Look at that, 1 scaling for 120 damage, looking good. So guys, her Dirty Healing is her ultimate and is arguably the most important part of Zinx, because she is meant to be a sustained tanky hero. Understanding this, optimizing for this, is probably going to be the most important part of playing Zinx. Now, the passive, there's two parts of it. There's a passive part. Gain mana regen proportional to 246% of missing mana. And the active part is that you heal 50% of damage taken. It's a heal. It's not damage taken into mana. It's an actual heal that can be affected by Blight. Costs 1.8.6 mana per point of healing, so you spend various amounts of mana to gain 50% damage taken as health. Basically, that's how it works. So when we take a look at the passive part of her ultimate, it's kind of pretty simple. We're going to look at the missing mana and how much mana regen do you get for missing mana. So for example, if you're missing 100 mana, you get 6 mana regen if your ultimate is Dirty Healing is at level 3. 6 mana regen for 100 missing mana. Her full mana pool is 982, so just about 1,000. If you're missing all her complete mana pool at level 15, you get 60 mana regen. You can see, even if you're missing if you're into the bottom half of her mana pool, that's a lot of mana regen. That is a ton. Keep that in mind when you're down there. Really, the conclusion here is that the more mana you're missing, the more value you're extracting from Zinx's kit. The more value, the more resources, the more stuff you're getting. And it leans to me like her passive part here almost incentivizes you to be missing mana. Now for the active part of her ultimate, arguably the more exciting part of her ultimate. So the active part is, if you were to take 100 damage, you get 50 health back from healing that you get instantly from taking that damage. You spend various amounts of mana depending on the level of your ultimate, 50, 40, or 30 mana to get that 50 health when you take that 100 damage. Netting, meaning obviously you only take 50 damage in the end because you heal 50 back. Now, as you can see, if you take, 1,500 damage that would normally kill a Zinx at level 15, her being, 1,442 health at max level, it would have killed her, but actually you heal for 750 of it, meaning you only take 750 damage, and you would have only spent 450 mana to get that healing if at level 3. Now that's pretty darn good. 450 mana to basically save your life. That's pretty good. And remember, we just said that her mana pool is 982. So this means that for only half of your mana pool, you can basically cut the damage that would have killed you in half. Really, really cool. And as you can see, you can get a lot of healing, mitigate a lot of damage for not that much mana. Now, what about adding stats? How do we look at adding stats, and how does that affect your ultimate? So we're going to look at CP of mana. 1 CP of mana is 30 mana, and that 30 mana can turn into 30, 37.5, or 50 health, depending on the level of your ultimate. Just for comparison, 1 CP of health is 60 health. 50 at level 3 for 1 CP of mana to 60. We're going to talk more about that later. So basically, 100 mana can turn into 100, 125, or 167 healing. So as you can see, if you use your entire mana pool, 982 of it, if you use 1,000 mana towards taking damage and sustaining from damage, you would have healed 1,667 health. That is incredible. That also means, though, because you're only mitigating 50% of it, that you would have taken 1,667 damage. You're still netting. You can't get away from the 50% damage that you're forced to take. You can't get away from it. That still means that you took 1,667 damage, though. So keep in mind that you're still taking damage through this healing. Just keep that in mind. That's pretty astonishing. A conclusion we can draw from this is that her base mana pool, 982 mana, can turn into a very large amount of healing. It's a lot. 1,667, almost. It's 982. That's a lot of healing. That also means, though, a lot of incoming damage that you still have to take. You gotta take it. That still means a lot. What does this mean, then, for adding health later on? Now, we're going to talk about adding health and stuff later on, but what if we combined the active and the passive parts? What if we combined the active, instant healing, and the passive part, gaining mana regen? What if we combined those two? Now, we're going to go with missing mana, the instant heal that you would have gotten from losing that mana and spending it as healing. You're going to get mana regen from missing that mana, and then you're going to get healing from that mana regen if you were to consistently take damage all the time. So this is assuming you're taking damage all the time. You're converting your mana regen you're getting from your missing mana into healing and damage mitigation. Is really kind of quite cool. So again, imagine if you're missing your entire mana pool, 982, you've used that as damage mitigation, as healing. You would have healed for 1,667 damage, assuming you have the health to still take that damage at the end of the day. You're therefore getting 60 mana regen from missing that mana, and that mana regen can therefore turn into 100 healing per second if you're always taking damage. 100 healing a second from missing your base mana pool, if, again, assuming you're taking damage and you have the health to absorb that damage, that's a lot. That is phenomenal. That is a lot of health you can, a lot of damage you can mitigate, and a lot of healing instantly when you're sitting at very low mana. Very, very interesting, and that's going to play into a lot of things later on. Now this, I had a lot of fun doing, and is hopefully not as complicated as it looks. What if we combined her dirty healing active, her passive, and added mana? If we combine all three of those and compare added mana to health. Remember, 1 CP of health is 60 versus mana, because the mana regen is over time, if healing is over time, we're going to have to take that into account as well. So CP, various levels of CP, of various levels of mana, gains you various levels of mana regen when you're missing that mana. You get healing from that mana regen if you're always taking damage and have the health to, still absorb that damage. And then you get instant healing from instantly using that mana on damage that's incoming. So if you have 10 CP of mana, that gives you 300 mana. You get 18 mana regen if you don't have that 300 mana, if you're missing it. You get 30 healing if you're going to use that mana regen as damage mitigation. And you would have gotten 300 healing instantly from missing that mana from a big damage source, for example. So you're talking about 500 healing and 30 healing per second from 10 CP of mana. You can see in 5 seconds, if we scroll over here, this is total healing over time in seconds, from 5 seconds to 55 seconds. You can see here that, we're right here, 650 healing in 5 seconds you get from 10 CP of mana. 10 CP of health is 600 health. So you can see here that mana actually is better than health after a certain period of time. In a 10-second fight, for example, that 10 CP of mana has turned into 800 healing. 15-second fight, 950. 20-second fight, 1100 healing. So as you can see, basically what this tells us is that 1 CP of mana beats health after 3 1/3 seconds of sustained incoming damage mitigation. Now, I find that really interesting. I kind of had that thought running in my mind. Doesn't therefore mana equal health on Zinx? And doesn't at some point mana beat out health at its own game? There it is. 1 CP of mana beats 1 CP of health after 3 1/3 seconds of sustained incoming damage mitigation. This is assuming, however, there's one crux to the whole thing, that you have the health to take that 50% damage that you're not mitigating. Remember, 100% damage, you're still only healing for 50%. So the other 50% you still have to take as damage. There's no way around it. So, how does health play into this? So, what about that other 50% of the damage that you still have to take at the end of the day? How does that come into play with her ult, with the damage mitigation, with the mana regen, with the health, with the healing over time, etc., etc. So this, we're going to look at hero level, and then various levels of health, various levels of your mana pool, and then beyond. The healing you can get from mana, the damage that you take to get that healing, the net damage after the healing, added health, and CP of health. So basically, how much added health do we need to use your mana pool, or just a certain amount of mana towards healing? How much health do you need extra on top of your base health in order to use certain amounts of mana as healing? So it's pretty simple. Here, level 1 to 4, it doesn't matter because you don't have your ultimate. It doesn't matter. Level 5 to 8, when your ultimate is level 1, you have 770 health, for example, at hero level 5. Not taking, this is just base stats, okay? It's just base stats. These are just numbers. These numbers can be whatever they, you know, added stats. Change this, of course. 770 health, 452 mana is your base mana pool. That, because it's a 1-to-1 at level 1, you can get 452 healing, meaning you have to take 904 damage, but the net damage, because he healed some, is 452. Because you have a health pool of 770, you have 318 health left over. Great, you're still alive, you have 318 health, you've used your entire mana pool. Great, you've used 452 mana for healing. Fantastic! As you level up, you level up your ult again. Your ult is at level 2. Well, that increases the mana efficiency for the healing, but you still, as you can see here, you still have enough base health, which can change with added stats, remember, and of course your mana pool as well. The net damage is still less than your health pool, so you're still fine. You can use this amount of mana, or a little bit more, and still live, You still have the health to absorb that extra 50% of the damage that you're not mitigating. Great, but take a look at this. As soon as you upgrade your ult to level 13, or use more mana than this towards healing, all of a sudden you don't have enough health in your base health pool to utilize this amount of mana, or a little bit less, and of course more, towards healing. So at this point, this is just base numbers. Of course, remember, this can change with added health, and this can change with added mana, or just using more mana through her regen. At this point, you need more health. So at level 13 and 15, at least in your base stats, you need to add extra health in order to utilize this amount of mana towards healing. Of course, remember, she has mana regen. She gets a lot of it. It's fantastic. So if you utilize, through just mana regen or added mana, if you utilize 1,050 mana, 1,250 mana, 1,450 mana towards healing, remember, look at how much extra health you need in order to essentially unlock that damage mitigation, you need a ton of it. So really, I find it really interesting that you can actually get away with a fair amount. You don't necessarily need to add health. Again, remember, just using this amount of mana to utilize your mana pool for healing. What does this mean? Adding health to fully utilize your base mana pool as healing is only needed at hero level 13, assuming no mana regen. Assuming no mana regen. Of course, that's a big part of her kit, so that comes into statements later on. Otherwise, your base health pool is enough before hero level 13 to utilize your base mana pool as healing. Of course, this is not including other ability usage. Of course, not including other ability usage. Some statements, though, some statements that I want to make about all of this is that it seems possible to use more than her base mana pool towards tanking damage via regen. Okay, it seems possible. You know, you use an ability or two. Yes, they are expensive, but you get a ton of mana regen. I do feel like it's possible to use more than this mana towards sustained tanking damage because you're going to be alive for a long time because you're tanky, right? I feel like it's going to be possible to use more than this mana as healing via regen over time. Therefore, total health will limit the amount of additional mana possible on Zinx. You need the health to absorb that 50% damage that you're not mitigating. So if you're thinking of building a crap ton of mana, either you need to be using a crap ton of abilities, or your health is going to severely limit how much you can use, how much mana you can use towards sustain, towards taking damage. Don't build too much mana without the health to absorb that extra 50% of that damage that you have to take. You have to take it. Now, since you still have to take that 50% health as damage, how does adding health per CP of adding mana, how does that work? If you want to add mana, but you want to emphasize her tanky sustained nature and use it primarily as damage mitigation, how does that work? Well, we need two scenarios. There's the instant burst, the instant healing you get from damage taking and costing mana. But then there's also a 15-second prolonged engagement where you gain mana regen from that missing mana that therefore can be used as damage mitigation. So in the instant burst, you're just talking about an instant, a whole bunch of damage, or near instant bunch of damage that you can mitigate. So 1 CP of mana to 10 CP of mana, you net. The damage you have to take, because you're only mitigating 50% of it, is 500 for 10 CP of mana. You have to take 500 damage. The CP that you need to add, therefore, to make sure that, you know, that 500 damage doesn't kill you is 9 CP, because 8 would kill you because you don't have enough. You need 9 CP of health in order to utilize 10 CP of mana as damage mitigation. Now, what if you're in a 15-second engagement, though, and that 10 CP of mana starts giving you back mana regen that is therefore being used as healing? Well, all of a sudden in a 10-second engagement, you're taking 770 damage as that 50% that you have to take, and you're healing for 770 of it as the other 50%. Now you need to add 13 CP of health in order for that to work, because if you don't have that amount of health, then you're just gonna die, because you die because you have to take 50% of that health. I hope that makes sense. You see that is much different. 13 CP is much different than 9. And it's in a 15-second engagement, which I think is fairly fair for a tanky hero meant for sustain. So, what does this mean? That means that if you're only concerned really about like near instant burst, you need 15% more CP of mana than health if you want to utilize it as tankiness. However, in a more realistic scenario, in my opinion, you need 25% more CP into health than CP into mana if you want to utilize that mana as sustained damage mitigation. So some statements, guys, that we can make from this. Utilizing 1 CP of mana as complete sustain will require more health than the mana you add in most scenarios. It's just going to be. You're going to build her tanky, and you're going to stay alive. And I think you will require more health in most scenarios than mana if you want to use that as sustain. So as a frontline sustain hero, her viability, I believe, is mostly defined by her ultimate ability. Her ultimate ability is what defines her in her role, and I think, therefore, optimizing stats to best serve her ultimate seems most appropriate. You don't build a Twin Blast tanky because that's not his role. You don't build a Muriel with crit. That is not her role. Zinx here, she is a sustained tank hero, and I think her ultimate and optimizing for her ultimate, and obviously armor to really help reduce that damage so you don't have to heal as much and spend as much mana, is most appropriate. There you guys go. Hopefully this makes sense. Hopefully you'll learn a thing or two. The TLDR will be in the video description, where hopefully I can just make some concise statements about this. A couple things first. Armor. All of this healing is after armor mitigates that damage. So armor just reduces the damage that you take, meaning you heal for 50% of that reduced amount of damage. Which makes it really, really nice. That means that it just spreads out. It makes it so that your mana pool and your health pool go a lot farther. It goes a lot farther. That is a consideration you need to take into account. I hope that you guys learned a thing or two. I hope that this was helpful. Please let me know down in the comments if there's anything I'm missing, if there's any perspectives I'm maybe not taking into consideration, anything I'm totally off my rocker about. But please watch this video a couple times. It's very complicated, and I think that I'm taking things into account precisely, that yes, this is in its own bubble with assumptions in there. I think they're fair, and I think you just need to kind of take that into consideration. I'm doing things in certain lights, in certain perspectives, with certain assumptions. Keep that into account. It's complicated. Zinx is complicated. Testing will really, really, really influence how you build on Zinx. So please let me know down in the comments what you guys think about Zinx's ultimate math. Please like this video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, share it with the community, and of course, guys, subscribe. You guys like this content, especially if you found it useful. Please subscribe so I can do it for you in the future. If you would like to support me on a regular basis, please head on over to my Patreon account, where you can make a pledge to help me do what I love. Till next time, like always, guys, stay optimistic and positive.